I want to show you how to work on a pastel painting, and I made lots and lots of mistakes in this painting. I used too many pastels, I made indents in the Pastelmat paper, but still I was able to save the painting, even though I almost threw it out a few times. But you can still end up with a lovely painting even having made lots of mistakes. Pastel is very forgiving, and there's lots you can do with it to cover up or fix mistakes. So I'm going to show you how to do that here. I've drawn out my painting on a piece of tracing paper, and then as you can see, I have gone over the back of it with charcoal. This is my Pastelmat. It's 8 1/4 by 8 1/4, so I drew that out. And yeah, just go over the lines on the back with charcoal, and then flip it back over so it's right reading again, and we'll tape it down and retrace over the drawing so that it becomes transferred onto the paper. I'm taking my time here tracing onto the Pastelmat, but just a cautionary warning to you, I pressed a little too hard. You don't have to press hard at all to make the transfer. Just a light touch. I ended up making indents in my pastel paper. I was able to fix it, but here I'm just flipping the tissue paper back and forth to make sure I got all my tracing done. And this is a kneadable eraser, and it's wonderful for picking up some of that excess charcoal off the paper. So these are some of the pastels I used. It was a mix, and I must say I did use too many pastels. Excuse the wall there. I'm up in a little attic space, and it's a well-used area, so it's not, the walls are not very pretty. But some more of the pastels I use. I don't have a huge amount yet, but I'm working on it, on my collection. I'll get there eventually. So I'm just starting with the base layers. I've added the original photo up in the corner there. So just taking my time. The colors don't have to be exact. It's more of a tonal value that I was going for. Lights and darks, warm and cool colors. But even then, I mean, they weren't exact. I didn't really know what I was doing, to be honest. So I was just playing around with color, and knowing that using Pastelmat, it's such a great paper. It can take layers and layers and layers of pastel. So I knew that if I really got myself into a pickle and was messing up, I'd probably be able to just keep going and it would be okay. So I'll just probably speed through this part and pop in every once in a while if I need to make a little comment. Here you can see already I went too dark on the forehead and I didn't like it, so I'm just brushing it off with a cheapy acrylic brush, and it worked really nicely. But that enabled me to go over again with colors that were more suitable for me. You can see here on the sweater where this is where I traced it with too heavy of a hand. I was able to fix it later on, but it made it a little bit more difficult to fill in with pastel. Although again, you know, this is how we learn, right? So it was here that I kind of had an idea that I didn't like the way the purple was looking against the green sweater, so I decided to change it a little and went with blue. And here again, I didn't have a plan for this painting. I didn't choose my pastels before I started. I just kind of winged it and kept picking colors and more colors. And I think that's where I ran into trouble. I just chose too many colors, and I wasn't really sure which direction I wanted to go with it. But this is my first portrait painting, and It's a whole lot different than watercolor, which I'm used to doing, but I still enjoyed the process. And the key here, I think, is just keep going. Don't give up on your painting. Even if you don't think it's going to work, keep going. And if you're using a water-friendly pastel paper, even if you finish your painting and you still don't like it, the paper is not wasted, because you can actually wash the pastel off, or you can brush it off. So even though this paper is a little more expensive, it still will never be wasted. So I had that in mind when I was working on this. As I said, I almost quit many times, but I knew from other pastel artists, they always say, keep going, keep going. And I'm glad I did, because I think it turned out okay. If you want to learn some great pastel tips and watch some wonderful demos, some of the pastel artists that I follow on YouTube are Alan Picard, Karen Margulis, Susan Jenkins, she has Monet Cafe, and Marla Bagetta. That's only 4 of many, many other wonderful pastel artists you can follow on YouTube. And I've learned so much from them, and they teach about different papers, different techniques, and the pastels they use. And so you've got access to all these free lessons, and that's how I'm learning. Here I'm using a hard pastel, and it's a Prismacolor Nupastel, and even though they're hard pastels, they're nice and silky smooth, but they're great for fine details like those little hairs that I was painting. Here I'm just trying to lay in the tonal values, and you can see the little grooves in the paper. That's again from me pressing too hard as I was tracing the initial drawing. But again, just by layering the pastels, most of them disappeared. And those that didn't, I was able to take a little blending tool at the end and just kind of wipe over them lightly, and they pretty much all disappeared. I really took my time with the eyes, because I think those are the most important feature in a portrait or a pet portrait. And so I could see lots of different colors in the eyes. I could see greens and blues and yellows. So I took my time. I wanted to show reflection, but most importantly, I wanted the eyes to show the personality of this little guy. Well, he's not so little, this big guy. His name is Moose. And he is a sweet, funny, crazy chocolate lab. You'll notice that's not actually white I'm using, it's a light blue, because in the eyes, whether it's human or pet portraits, very rarely there's white. The eyeball itself is more of a blue tinge, but also the sky is reflected in his eyes, so it's blue. These are Stabilo Carbothelo pastel pencils that I'm using for the eyes, just because my pastels are so big and chunky and I wanted to get the detail. It was in this phase of the painting that I almost quit. I didn't like the way the dog was turning out, but with all the pastel artists saying, even if you think it doesn't look good, keep going, I took their advice and I kept going, and I'm glad I did. But this is what people call the adolescent stage of a painting, or the ugly stage, and I think most paintings go through that. I know with my watercolor paintings, there's always a point in the middle of the painting where it just doesn't look good, but I know enough about my watercolor portraits that if I just keep going, they'll turn out okay. So that's what I did with this. Just kept going, and it did pan out. I was glad I did. You'll notice here I'm using what's called a Mahlstick, and that is what many artists use just to keep their hands off of their paintings. I didn't want to smudge the pastel. Here's a little picture of what it looks like, but it's a very helpful tool. But you can use what you have. If you have a stick or anything, you know, just to keep your hand up off of your painting, anything will work. This is a new pastel I'm using for the highlight. They're great for finer details because I can get a thinner line. I try not to blend my pastels too much. That's what I've learned from all those wonderful pastel artists, that once you get enough layers on there, the pastels will start blending themselves, and I really love the look of that. So here and there you'll see me kind of just touching up a little bit hard edges that I don't want, or softening edges, but other than that I try and let the pastels do the blending themselves on the paper. I was not happy with these shadows at all. I thought they were too dark, the wrong color. So again, I took my little paintbrush, a softer one this time, and just was able to wipe off some of that pastel. And I love that you can do this. Excuse any noises you hear in the background. I can hear my dogs barking, and there's a lot of wind noise here today. I'm almost finished the painting now, but I took a little blender tool and just very gently went over those indents in the Pastelmat that I created when I pressed too hard, and was able to pretty much fill them in. So I found this worked really well. Thank you so much for joining me on my pastel journey. Any constructive criticism or helpful hints are always welcome here, and I hope you'll join me in the next one.